Good day to you, Year 9, and welcome to week 6 now of science. I hope you all had a lovely extended weekend, enjoyed a little bit of the sunshine. We're going to be cracking on. We've got our usual 5 lessons this week, and we're going to be looking more at the heart and the circulatory system. So far we have looked at what the blood is made of, and also how the blood travels around, which is in the 3 blood vessels. So today, as I say, we're going to be focusing on the heart. So we need to know the parts of the heart, and we're also going to look at some problems that can occur with the heart. So we need to, for the lower grades, we need to be able to state the function of the heart, so what it does. I'm sure most of you already know that. We need to be able to identify most of the parts of the heart, and also some of the problems that can occur with the heart. Moving that up, so for 5 to 6s, we've got to be able to describe the function of the main parts of the heart. We need to be able to describe problems that can develop with the blood vessels, and also some of the treatments that are available for those problems, and also giving some advantages and disadvantages of some of those treatments. For 7 to 8, we need to be able to explain how the structure of the heart is related to its function. We need to know the different parts of it. There will be a video, hopefully, if Miss Corbett can get hold of some hearts. There will be a dissection showing the different parts of the heart and what it actually looks like in real life. If not, we'll have to wait till we can get some ordered and do it at a later point. We also need to be able to evaluate, so pros, cons and conclusions of stents and statins, which are some of the treatments for heart diseases. Okay, so it was over 50 years ago now that the first doctor actually managed to do a successful heart transplant. So that is where you are removing a patient's heart and replacing it with the heart of somebody who is recently deceased. They had tried it beforehand, but they didn't know about different blood types, so quite often they would fail. And it wasn't until about 1967 that we really had the true truly successful heart transplant. So the question is, before we get going, how important do you think this breakthrough was? So how important in terms of other medical procedures, and what sort of the outcomes are going to be for being able to do successful heart transplants? So have a think about that. There isn't a right or wrong answer. It's just your opinion before we get going. Okay, so the heart. I'm sure most of you know that the heart, the function of the heart is to pump blood around the body. Okay, now it's actually got 2 sides to it that creates that double circulatory system that we've spoken about before, and it's made up of 4 chambers, and the heart will beat about 70 times each minute, depending on whether you're at rest or exercise or your resting heartbeat. Now, the walls of the heart are almost entirely muscle, and it's a special type of muscle called cardiac muscle. Now, we know that the heart is an organ, so it contains other things as well, which we'll look at later on, but the vast majority of it is muscle. Now, the muscle itself doesn't get its blood from the blood inside it. There's actually a network of arteries and capillaries that go around it, which you can see in the picture where it's been plasticized. So they put plastic in the blood vessels and then dissolve the heart. So you can see the network of blood vessels that actually supply the heart itself with its own blood. And they come from the coronary arteries. So coronary is to do with hearts, and the arteries are supplying the heart with that blood. Now that's important because later on we're going to look at some problems that can occur with the coronary arteries and how we can actually treat them. So pop down that the coronary arteries are the blood vessels that supply the heart with blood. You might want to pause the video to do that. Okay, so as we've said before, there are two sides to the heart. So this animation has just got a section cut out of it so you can see inside. There's two parts to it, say 4 chambers. You can see the 2 bottom chambers, which are called the ventricles, a lot easier on this. The atria, which are the top chambers, are a little bit covered up, but it's showing how the heart actually works. Now you'll notice that there are some structures in there that are kind of whitish in colour. They are called valves. We'll talk more about the valves and what they do later on, but you can see in this animation them opening and closing as the muscle contracts and pushes the blood out. You'll see that some are opening and some are closing. Now here is a diagram of a heart. Okay, it's not the shape that you are used to drawing love hearts or anything like that. It is a little bit more complicated than that. I would suggest that you can either print out a picture. You can easily find them from Google Images. If you don't have access to a printer, if you Google image heart structure or diagram of heart, you might find a slightly easier one to draw. But here is a picture of the heart. You can see from the different shades of red that there are 2 sides to the heart. You'll see that there are 4 chambers. You've got the right atrium, the left atrium, the right ventricle, and the left ventricle. Those are the 4 chambers to the heart. Now between those chambers you will see that there are some valves. You've got the tricuspid and bicuspid valves that go between the atria and the ventricles, and there are also some valves that go between the ventricles and the arteries, but we'll look at those ones later on. Now there are some blood vessels that are supplying the heart, taking blood to the heart, or blood vessels taking blood away from the heart. Now if they are leaving the heart, then they are arteries, and if they're going to the heart, then they are veins. So you can see that the vein that supplies blood into the right atrium is the vena cava. So that is bringing blood from the body back into the heart. That is the vena cava. The artery that is leaving the right ventricle is the pulmonary artery. So the blood from the body goes down the vena cava into the right atrium, then into the right ventricle, and is then pumped through the pulmonary artery. Now the pulmonary artery takes blood to the lungs where it gets oxygen. So once it's picked up oxygen from the lungs, it comes back into the heart through the pulmonary vein. So pulmonary is to do with the lungs. When it enters the heart from the lungs through the pulmonary vein, it enters the left atrium, and then blood will be pumped to the left ventricle, where it will then be pumped through the aorta, which is an artery, through the aorta, and that takes the blood all around the body. Now you might have noticed that the lefts and the rights seem to be the wrong way round, but when we're talking about the heart, we're imagining that the heart is inside us. So if you are looking at it, it's the other way around. So the left ventricle is on the right hand side if you're looking at it, but if it was inside you, it would be on the left. So pause the video. Can we get a diagram of the heart? It does not need to be as detailed as this. It can be a simple sketch as long as you've got the 4 chambers labelled and the major blood vessels that go into the heart or leave the heart. Pause the video now. Okay, so we're now going to look at the passage of the blood, which I have spoken about a little bit, as it goes through the heart. Okay, so blood will enter the top chambers of the heart. So the 2 top chambers of the heart, which are slightly smaller, are called the atria. So you've got the left atrium, the right atrium. The plural of atrium is atria. And that is shown here. The blood coming from the right atrium, or into the right atrium, is the vena cava, and that won't have much or any oxygen in it at all. We say it's deoxygenated because it's come from the body. All that oxygen has gone to all the different parts of the body. So you can see here on number 2 that the blood is coming from the body through the vena cava and it goes into the right atrium. So the next point is the blood coming into the left atrium is from the pulmonary vein, and that has been oxygenated. So again, we're talking about the top chambers, the atrium. We've got the blood that has picked up oxygen, come back to the heart. It goes into the left atrium. Now, the atria will then contract, and they do it together, and it forces that blood down into the ventricles. Now, the blood doesn't go the wrong way, so it doesn't go back through the veins, because valves will close to make sure that it only goes in one direction. So as the atria contract, the valves between the pulmonary vein and the vena cava in the heart will close, and it pushes the blood down into the ventricles. Okay, now the next part of the contraction is the ventricles contracting. Now if you listen to a heartbeat, it isn't just a single thud, thud, thud. It makes we call it a lub-dub, lub-dub. So the lub is the atria contracting, and then the dub is where the ventricles are contracting. Now that contraction of the ventricles, because the valves close behind them, pushes all of the blood through the arteries. So you've got blood going through the pulmonary artery, and you've got blood going through the aorta. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is, from that information, is create a very simple flow chart to show the process of the blood going through the heart. Okay, now you can either do it as the atria and then the ventricles and then through the arteries, or you can do it separately for each side of the heart. Either way is fine. So can you pause the video and can you create that flow chart now, please? Okay, so your flowchart or flowcharts will not look exactly the same as mine, but we just need to make sure that we've got some of these key points in there. So deoxygenated blood from the body will enter the right atrium through the vena cava. The next stage is the oxygenated blood from the lungs goes into the left atrium. So this is putting both of them together, and that happens through the pulmonary vein. The atria then contract and push the blood into the ventricles. The right ventricle sends deoxygenated blood to the lungs through the pulmonary artery, and the left ventricle pumps oxygenated blood around the body through the aorta. So you might want to pause the video, just make sure that you've got all of that key information, whether the blood is oxygenated or deoxygenated, which blood vessel it's travelling through or about to travel through, and what chamber it goes into or leaves. Okay, so we've mentioned these valves before, and you don't need to know the name of all of the different valves. You just need to know the function of the valves, okay? And that is that they stop the blood going the wrong way. So it's the same as where we were looking about veins. So veins have got valves in them to stop the backflow of blood. The heart also has valves in them, and they stop the blood going the wrong way. So they stop the backflow of blood. Okay, so now on to you. Can you describe the function of the heart valves and explain how they work? Now, we've said what the function of the heart valves is. In order to explain how they work, you need to think about what kind of material they're made of. So do you think that they are a soft material, or do you think they're a hard material? And what is it that's causing them to open or close? So have a go at that. Obviously, we'll go through the answers, see whether you got it. But have a go at describing the function of the heart, which we've already spoken about, and then have a go at explaining how it is that they work. So pause the video now and have a go at that, please. Okay, so grab yourself a different coloured pen and let's see how we did. Okay, so for 2 marks is what we've already discussed, which is that valves ensure that the blood goes in the right direction. So they stop the backflow of blood. That's going to be your first 2 marks. Now, the way that they do that is that valves are flexible, so they're made of a softer material. It's not like bone or another tissue like that. It's actually a flexible material. Okay, so well done if you put that they're flexible or soft material. Now, the reason why they close is because they will, when the heart is pumping or the muscles are contracting, it actually puts pressure on them, which snaps them shut, okay, or slams shut. So when there is pressure, it causes them to close. So very well done if you got that. If you didn't get those marks, then can you make a note of what it is that you missed out, or correct your sentences as necessary? Okay, so a little bit more new information for you. We're going to be looking at the walls of the heart. So looking at the picture of the heart, you've got the left-hand side, which is the right as you're looking at it, and you've got the right-hand side of the heart, which is the left as you're looking at it. Do you notice a difference between the walls of the ventricles, between those 2 sides? If you can think of a difference, or can see a difference, why do you think that difference is? Okay, so you can probably see that the muscle, the cardiac muscle around the left ventricle, is a lot thicker than the right ventricle. Now, why do you think that might be? It's because on the left ventricle, it's got to pump that blood all the way around the body. If you think about where the heart and the lungs are, the right hand side just needs to pump it a little distance to the lungs, but the left hand side has got to pump it all the way around the body. So it needs much thicker walls to make sure that it gets enough pressure to push that blood through. So can you make a note of which side has got thicker muscular walls and why that is? You can pause the video. Okay, so that is the structure of the heart. We need to know the 4 chambers. We need to know about valves. We need to know the major blood vessels, so the 2 veins and the 2 arteries that go to or leave the heart. But we also need to know about things that go wrong. And one of the things that can go wrong with the heart, something you all would have heard of, is heart attacks. So I want you just to pause the video in a second and think about what you know a heart attack is and what you think might cause it. So pause the video, you don't have to write anything down, but have a think about that question. Okay, so hopefully we've had a think about what we already know about heart attacks, what they are and what actually causes them. So we're going to have a look at what does cause them quite often and what we can do to treat them. So most heart attacks are going to be caused by the actual cardiac muscle, so the heart muscle, not getting enough blood. Now, we spoke earlier about the coronary artery that supplies the blood to the heart. And the heart needs that blood because it's full of oxygen and glucose, which is going to need for respiration to get the energy to actually contract. Now, sometimes those arteries, those coronary arteries, can become blocked. And they can become completely blocked, or it can just reduce the flow of blood quite significantly. So you can see at the bottom, on the left-hand side, we're going back to that picture that shows the network of blood vessels supplying the heart. On the right-hand side, you can see a normal section of artery. So you've got that thick muscular wall that we spoke about in last lesson. And then in the other 3 pictures, you can see what happens when there is damage. So sometimes there might be a tear in the artery wall, and that causes fatty material to start building up. And that becomes so much that you can get a clot in the artery because it's so narrow, things can't push through it, so it gets blocked. Or it can just be reducing it so much that the heart can't get enough of that oxygen and glucose. And that causes a pain in the heart. And that's what a heart attack is. The heart will stop pumping because it's not got enough glucose and oxygen. And then obviously that can lead to death. Now, there are ways in which we can actually treat this coronary heart disease. So coronary heart disease is one of the biggest killers in the Western world, and that's because of our diet and lack of exercise, alcohol consumption, smoking, things like that. So if somebody is at risk of having a heart attack and they've identified that these coronary arteries are very much reducing the amount of blood that is going through, there are different things that doctors can do. And one of those is called a stent. So a stent is used to treat coronary heart disease. So when those arteries are getting blocked up. And it's a little, very thin metal mesh that is placed into the artery. So they'll often go in through a blood vessel in your arm. They'll have a kind of like an X-ray picture, so they can see, the doctor can see the moving of this very long kind of needle, flexible needle, goes in, finds the right artery, and then it will open up the stent and it forces that blood vessel open. And the way that they actually cause it to open up is they have a teeny tiny kind of balloon that is inside it. They inflate it and that pushes it open, and then it will stay in place. So you can see that in the animation at the bottom. Because it isn't major heart surgery, you don't need a general anaesthetic, so this will be done when you're awake. It's relatively pain-free, just a little bit discomfort. So I'd like you to pause the video now, and I would like you to put down what a stent is and how it works, because we do need to know this form of treatment for the specification. So pause the video now, please. Okay, so another way in which doctors can treat coronary heart disease, if stents aren't an option, and they do prefer stents because you don't have to go through major surgery, but if a stent isn't going to work, then you have something called a bypass surgery. And that basically replaces that blood vessel that's blocked or starting to block up. It replaces it with another blood vessel. Okay, so bypass surgery replaces the narrow or blocked coronary arteries with sections of veins from other parts of the body. Now, this one would be classed as a kind of major surgery, so it is very expensive, and with any surgery there are risks associated with general anaesthetics where they put you to sleep for the operation. So can you pause the video now, please, and can you put down what bypass surgery is? Okay. Now, the last treatment that we need to know about is something called statins. Now, statins are actually a pill that you take, and doctors will prescribe statins to anyone who is at risk of cardiovascular disease. So this is a preemptive strike. You do this if people are at risk, and that could be age, could be to do with their diet, it could be to do with alcohol consumption, smoking, things like that. And what they do is they reduce the amount of blood cholesterol. Now, the cholesterol in your blood is what the fatty deposits are made of. So if you can reduce the amount of fatty material, then obviously the coronary arteries will be less likely to block up. So statins are a medication, and they're prescribed if you are at risk of high blood cholesterol. So can we pause the video now and put down what statins are? Okay, so now that we've gone through 3 ways in which we can treat coronary heart diseases, we also need to think of what the advantages and disadvantages are for them. So I'd like you to do a really simple table. It will have 3 columns. You'll have the stents on one row, and you'll have bypass surgery on another row. So we're not looking at statins on this one. We're now looking at these two are just about treating something that's already there. Now, in the second column, you're going to have your advantages, and then the third one, the disadvantages. So we're comparing the 2 methods of treating coronary heart disease, and we're trying to put down some advantages, at least one advantage and one disadvantage of each. So can you pause the video now and do that, please? Okay, so grab a pen. Let's see how we did on that. If you are missing any of the information or it's incorrect, then obviously correct your work. So if we do the advantages and disadvantages, I know that this looks it's the other way around to what I said, but it's going to have the same information. So if we look at stents first, so an advantage of stents is that you don't need to use an anaesthetic. That would be a good advantage. That means that you don't have the risks of anaesthetic. It's also a lot cheaper than doing bypass surgery. Now, a disadvantage of stents is that they're not good at being used if you have a severe blockage. So if there is a major blockage, you wouldn't be able to use a stent to treat it. Now, bypass surgery, an advantage is that they are more effective against severe blockages. So if you have a severe blockage, then a bypass surgery would be more effective. But a disadvantage of it is that it's expensive, but also you have a general anaesthetic. Okay, so that is it from me today. Hopefully we have taken from this lesson the different parts of the heart that we need to know about, and as I say, hopefully Miss Corbett will be able to get hold of some hearts so she can show you a heart dissection. If it won't be this week, then it will be in a future lesson, but we do need to know the different parts of the heart, what the heart does, so pumping blood around the body. We need to know the different blood vessels that go into the heart or take blood away from the heart. So remember, if blood is leaving the heart, that's through an artery. You've got the aorta and the pulmonary artery. And then if blood is going into the heart, that's through a vein. You've got the pulmonary vein and the vena cava. Hopefully we have a better understanding of the passage of blood. So it going into the atria, then into the ventricles, and then through the arteries. And also hopefully we know some different ways in which we can treat heart disease, coronary heart disease, and some advantages and disadvantages of both. So that's it. Thank you very much for taking part in the lesson. I hope you're all well, and tomorrow, if all goes to plan, will be Miss Corbett delivering a lesson showing a heart dissection, which will give you a better understanding of the different parts of the heart and how it works. Take care of yourselves, and you will hear from me soon.